A trip to the movies turned into a history lesson for our next guest, who's now celebrating his family's legacy in the book, The Invisible Generals, which tells the story of America's first two black generals.
These men changed the face of the military forever, and their accomplishments continue to impact our lives every single day. Joining us this morning with a remarkable story of courage and leadership is author Doug Melville. Good morning, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
So tell us, let's get right into it. Who are the Invisible Generals?
So the Invisible Generals were the first two black generals in American history. They were a father and a son with the same name, General Benjamin O. Davis Sr. and Benjamin O. Davis Jr. And these two men worked over 13 different presidential administrations behind the scenes to create some of the laws, some of the policies, and also break so many barriers in the military and government, but their story had never been told.
So what is your connection?
So Benjamin Davis Jr. is my great uncle.
Oh, wow.
And he never had any biological kids of his own, but raised my dad, who was his oldest nephew from the time he was 7, as if it was his only child.
Oh, wow.
So the legacy could have been broken. And it was my opportunity when I went to go see the movie Red Tails. On a normal trip to the movie, I go to go see the movie Red Tails, and then the main character is Ben Davis Jr., but his name was changed in the movie. And it was Colonel Bullard, and it was played by Terrence Howard. And I was so upset. I was like, this is not the name. And I went home and I told my dad, I said, Dad, they changed his name in the movie. And my dad said, Doug, if you think changing the name was bad, let me tell you about all the other things I went through, and told me and proceeded to share with me the story of these two men. I was so inspired by it, I started researching and said, I have to tell this story to the world.
And that's the first time you heard those stories?
Yes, that was the first time. I was 30 years old.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
a whole new respect for your, what's now your grandfather, right?
Yeah.
That's
And the
crazy.
thing about it is a lot of parents that grew up are the silent generation. The best stories in the world are on our couch. We're not listening. Families of veterans and veterans. And when he started telling me the story of what they did in the military, how they were the first to help desegregate the military under Truman, how they helped create the Tuskegee Airmen, which are so famous. Ben Davis Jr. was the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen. And I couldn't believe that no one knew that this was a father and a son, and that my dad was there as a witness. So him sharing the story with me, even in my 30s, made me drop everything and say, I want to make sure that I tell this story to the world. And also I changed my profession to become a diversity officer to make sure companies also don't allow people to operate in a cloak of invisibility.
Yeah, and don't you think it's so critical that people know these stories for inspiration and inclusivity, diversity, everything? And from what I understand, the history here has had an impact at West Point. Is there now a building?
Yes. So we celebrate this building that was just created several years ago at West Point. It's a barracks called the Davis Barracks. It's one of the largest, most expensive buildings on the history of the campus. And a few years ago, they took a poll and they started going through different names of graduates and came up with Benjamin O. Davis Jr. as the name that they would recognize the barracks under. So when you go to the campus, there's a huge building with his name, with a plaque that shares this story. So it's so important that these people's accomplishments are heard, but also realize after the military, so many veterans go on to do so many great things. Ben Davis Jr. led the creation of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit.
I was just going to ask you about that. How does that happen?
You know, this is the unbelievable story. So he retired from the military in 1970. He had worked so long with the Air Force to ensure safety. He worked to help pass the bill to allow women to be cadets at the Air Force Academy. So he was trailblazing, but now he's retired. So the Pentagon brings him in and says, hey, we have a lot of skyjackings. The skies aren't safe. And he then said, there's a few things that I need to do. Number one, implement commercial airport security. So he was the one who led the creation of what is now the TSA.
That's insane.
The second thing was the Sky Marshal program, trained 4,000 officers to go undercover to keep commercial flights safe. It worked so well under Nixon. Carter brought him on and said, how can we do the same thing for traffic? and he created the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, which was the maximum speed limit to optimize gas usage as well as keep people safe. So even after the military, this man did all this, led the Tuskegee Airmen, first black graduate from West Point in the 20th century, helped, raise my dad and do so many great things for our family. And no one ever knew his name. And I thought it was so important to tell the story and also encourage people to say, you and your family have unbelievable stories of your parents, aunts, uncles, siblings that did so much that we don't know about. And we have to capture these stories before it's too late.
Quickly, before we leave, tomorrow's a special day to honor him?
Yes. Tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of President Bill Clinton honoring him with his 4th star, which was December 9th, 1998. We were all invited to the White House grounds to celebrate this moment. He wasn't elevated to 4th star under LBJ due to race. So Bill Clinton then elevated him in 1998 with 10 years of lobbying from Senator John McCain. So this is one of the stories that really goes across the aisle, that really says we must honor our veterans and heroes, tell their stories, and realize all these different pieces of tapestry are American history, not black history, not to be put in a box, but to say all of us benefit and are touched every day by the work of these men.
What an amazing story, and I'm sure he's looking down on you
I
right
hope
now.
so.
Very proud of the
I
work
hope
that
so.
you've done. Thank you so much for sharing his story.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today, and happy holidays.
We could talk to you for hours.
I know.
This is so interesting.
So much to learn. All right, Doug Melville, thanks again. All right, and you can pick up a copy of Invisible Generals wherever books are sold.